This is Grizz's workshop. This scruffy-looking mofo is Grizz.
Not an expert, not an exemplar of safety. Proceed at your own risk.
You may have been waiting for. I think there has been many clues along the way, but just in case you were not paying attention. Hashtag offcuts only 23.
Also, you can use other ingredients.
Another challenge, another bird build. This time I'll be doing a sculpture of a Black Winged Stilt. Mrs. Grizz and I get down to Frampton Marsh quite regularly, and this May we were pleased to see that there was a Black Winged Stilt there, a very rare visit to the shore, normally in southern Europe I believe. Due to climate change, we're back here. This is a diagram of the stilt, and I'll be doing the one on the right with the arrow on it. That was what I printed out and then cut out on bandsaw. It's just on a bit of melamine now. There's silicone. Now my end burst, not for the first time, and the silicone went everywhere, so I had to use a spatula to put it on rather than the nozzle. Now here I've sprayed silicone mould release into the mould, and now I'm doing a dry fit of all the bits of hardwood I have, and I'm cutting more down to fill the void. Here I'm coating bits of wood in resin, hoping that there'd be no air bubbles coming from the wood, but there was. And in the end, all the resin ended up coating the mat, so I ended up scraping the blocks.
You're aware of the hairy hand, which is
You get it when you're about 15.
The hairy hand is a disembodied hand that would appear from nowhere if you're driving along the B3021, and it would steer you off the road.
Officer. Yeah. And it smelt of cider, didn't it?
The pour complete. It's now time to demould it. It's a bit tricky. It doesn't really want to come off there, especially with all that silicone. But with a lot of work and swearing and banging my feet, eventually I managed to get the mould to release and end up with a big block. Now I wish I'd put some struts down the side of the mould, because it did bow out a bit at the top, which meant I used an awful lot more epoxy than I really wanted to. But hey, I can always cut away. It's much harder to then add on to it afterwards. But here I am now, at my bandsaw, cutting away all the excess I can. And then I push my luck too far and break the bandsaw blade. I've broken a lot of bandsaw blades on this bandsaw. Change the bandsaw blade over, which takes much longer than really should, just to get a bit more away here. And after I finished using the bandsaw, I then go outside to the carving disc on my angle grinder. This is a cheap Chinese angle grinding disc, and it's very coarse. really pulls on you, so you have to use two hands to use it. I did later on get a more expensive cut saw disc, which is much better. The medium cut saw disc, so much smoother, so much easier to use, and the lower just it shows me going to the sander here. I do go back out after this in order to smooth it down, which you should see. Yeah, there you go. You see, much nicer shape after using cut saw disc. Does a much better job. So now you see I've gone down right to the smallest spindle to get into the nooks and crannies of the neck. Put a bit more detail on the tail. Now I'm more or less just sanding it smooth. I've got pretty much the shape where I want it to be. And off screen, I got a bit of oak dowel, chucked it up in my drill, and then sanded it down to a point. I didn't record it because I ran out of space on my camera. But here we are now. I've come off. I'm using a finer grit to get it as smooth as possible. I'll go all the way from 80 grit to 10,000 grit. And that's just the 10,000 there right at the end. And afterwards, I go put a bit of polish on with this buffing pad and buff away until it gets a bit shinier. Now it's ready for the base. So I've already poured epoxy previously, so now it's set up. I need to hit it with some sanding pads in order for there to be a key on the base for the next pour of epoxy to stick to. So in this case, I'm just getting my mica powder ready, which is the dye, and I'm mixing the resin up. Now the resin is a 1:2.45 to 0.5 mix. Need to mix it thoroughly with the ice lolly stick for up to 3 minutes, and then when that's mixed, I then need to mix it again in with the colours. The idea is I've got a brown mica colour here and a blue mica colour, and the idea is to mimic natural water in the wetlands where you will find the Black Winged Stilt. I've got that little bit of clear at the end, which gives a nice texture on top of that blue. I'm using the stick now just to drag it through to give a more natural look when it relaxes and after I've hit it with a blowtorch. So after it's set, there's been a bit of a leak on the side. Using the spindle sander here to take all that away, so we're going straight back to wood on the side. Takes a bit of doing, and I'm hitting it there with that rubber block, which takes off a lot of the sawdust, which means the sander does a more thorough job. I'm putting a slight bevel, slight chamfer on the block at the bottom there. This is a nice transition from wood to epoxy. So I'm going to start the sanding process as I did before. I'm just doing it all by hand here. Again, using the water to clean off any sawdust. I'm using my sponges and polishing compound to go all the way up to the buffing pad, which, as you see here, with a bit of a nice shine. And now the bird stuck to its leg, its uni leg. I thought I had a better balance than using two legs in the end. Plus I wanted to keep it a little more abstract. As you see, there's no real detail on the sculpture. Now that I'm using there as a wax paste, it's Renaissance wax. Renaissance, yes, and that's what the British Museum use on a lot of their metal and wooden objects, just to preserve them and to give them a nice sheen. It's quite expensive, that little pot, but it lasts a while. Again, I'm going to polish this up another time. I'm going to go with the sponges and knock it back a bit more before I come back in with a polishing pad and finish it off. And here I am just finishing it up, and in the end I'm very pleased with my bird. My Black Winged Stilt doesn't have any wings and is in black. Made up of lots of bits of offcut scrap wood, if you will. But aren't we all just scrap wood? Aren't we all just made up of lots of little bits of scrap wood? If you look closely at my Black Winged Stilt, you'll find scratches, voids, bubbles, imperfections that I haven't quite filled. We're all made up of scratches and imperfections that we haven't quite healed. Thanks for watching, and if you can put up with another episode, I'll see you next time.